Imagine you are standing in the center of Rome in the year 400 AD. You are surrounded by marble columns that touch the sky. You see aqueducts carrying fresh water over horizons. You see the Colosseum, a stadium that holds 50,000 screaming fans. You're standing in the capital of the greatest empire the world has ever known. An empire that spans 3 continents. An empire that has lasted for 1,000 years. If you tapped a Roman citizen on the shoulder and told them that in just 76 years, this entire city would be empty ruins, and the empire would vanish from the face of the earth, they would have laughed in your face. They would call you crazy. Rome is eternal. Rome is invincible. The systems are too big to fail. Now, fast forward to today. Stand in Times Square in New York City. Look at the skyscrapers. Look at the stock tickers flashing record highs. Look at the military power that dominates every ocean on the globe. If I told you that by the year 2026, the foundations of this American empire would irrevocably crack, you would probably have the exact same reaction as that Roman citizen. You would say that America is too big to fail. But history is not a set of random events. It is a blueprint. It is a repeating cycle of rise and fall, driven by unchanging human nature. We are not special. We are just the latest actors in a very old play. And right now, we are in the final act. The scariest thing about the fall of Rome isn't that it happened. It's how eerily similar it looks to our current reality. The parallels are not vague. They are mathematical, they are cultural, and they are undeniable. Rome didn't fall overnight. It succumbed to a slow-acting poison, a specific economic mistake that ate away at its soul until it was too weak to stand. Today, America has ingested that exact same poison. We are showing the exact same symptoms. And according to the historical timeline of empire life cycles, we are fast approaching our own expiration date. The year 2026 is not an arbitrary number. It marks the 250th anniversary of the United States, and 250 years is the historical average lifespan for a global superpower before it undergoes a catastrophic reset. In this video, we are not just going to look at dusty history books. We are going to hold a mirror up to our own civilization. We are going to identify the singular fatal mistake that destroyed Rome and prove to you that America is not only repeating it, but doing it faster and on a much larger scale. To understand the end, we have to understand the beginning. Rome wasn't always corrupt. In its early days, during the Roman Republic, it was a society built on what historians call stoic virtues. It was built by hard men, farmers who became soldiers to defend their land and then returned to farming. There was a deep sense of duty, frugality, and shared destiny. Economically, this was reflected in their money. For centuries, the Roman currency was the silver denarius. It was a coin made of almost pure silver. It was sound money. If you held a denarius, you held actual intrinsic value. You didn't have to trust the government. You only had to trust the metal in your hand. This sound money created a stable foundation. It encouraged savings. It allowed for long-term planning. It funded the roads, the aqueducts, and the mighty legions that conquered the known world. Because the money was real, the economy was real. But success is a dangerous drug. As Rome conquered more territory, immense wealth flooded into the capital. The ruling class stopped being warrior farmers and became wealthy aristocrats. The focus shifted from production to consumption. By the time the Republic died and the Roman Empire began under Augustus Caesar, the seeds of decay were already planted. The empire was vast, stretching from England to Egypt. Maintaining this expanse was incredibly expensive. You had to pay hundreds of thousands of soldiers stationed thousands of miles away. You had to build and repair infrastructure across continents, and most importantly, you had to keep the population of Rome happy. This is where the concept of bread and circuses originated. To keep the massive unemployed population of the city from rioting, the emperors provided free grain and massive gladiatorial games. It was the ancient version of welfare and endless entertainment distraction. All of this cost enormous amounts of money. The gold and silver looted from conquered nations began to dry up. The expenses of the empire started to outweigh its income. Rome had a budget deficit. Now, an emperor has 2 choices when faced with a deficit. Choice 1 is the hard choice. You can cut spending, which makes the citizens angry, or you can raise taxes, which makes the rich, powerful people angry. No emperor wanted to do that. They wanted to be loved. They wanted to be gloried. So they chose the easy path. They chose the fatal mistake. They decided to mess with the money. This is the mechanism of collapse. Pay close attention, because this is exactly where we are today. It started slowly. Around the year 64 AD, Emperor Nero faced a financial crisis. He needed more money to pay his debts and fund his lavish lifestyle. He came up with a devious idea. He gathered up the silver denarius coins, melted them down, and mixed in a small amount of cheap base metals like copper. He then reminted the coins. Suddenly, Nero had more coins to spend. The new denarius looked the same as the old one on the surface. It had the emperor's face on it, It was officially declared to be worth the same amount, but in reality it had less silver. It had less intrinsic value. This was the ancient version of money printing. Nero had just debased the currency. At first, nobody noticed. The party continued. But subsequent emperors saw how easy this was. If they needed to fund a war, they just added more copper to the silver mix. If they needed to build a new palace, they just debased the currency a little more. Over the next 200 years, this process accelerated. By the time of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, around 170 AD, the denarius was only about 75% silver. 50 years later, it was down to 50% silver. By the year 270 AD, under Emperor Aurelian, the denarius had become a joke. It was barely 5% silver. It was basically a bronze coin with a thin silver wash over it that rubbed off after a few uses. The Roman government had effectively stolen the wealth of its people slowly over 2 centuries. But here is the thing about economics. You cannot cheat reality forever. The people of the empire eventually realized what was happening. Merchants, traders, and soldiers realized that the coins they were receiving were junk. They knew the government was lying to them about the value of the money. The result was catastrophic inflation. Because the money was worth less, merchants demanded more of it for the same goods. The price of wheat, oil, and clothing skyrocketed. We have records showing that in the 2nd century, a specific measure of wheat cost around 8 drachmas. By the 3rd century, that same measure of wheat cost 120,000 drachmas. Savings were wiped out. If you'd saved good silver coins your whole life, the government's new junk coins made your nest egg worthless. The middle class was evaporated. To combat this, emperors tried even more desperate measures. Emperor Diocletian issued the Edict on Maximum Prices in the year 301 AD. He basically made it illegal to raise prices under penalty of death. It failed miserably. Merchants simply stopped selling goods, or they moved their activities to the black market. Shortages spread across the empire. People were starving in the streets because the economic system had completely broken down. The soldiers on the frontiers, realizing they were being paid in worthless metal, began to mutiny. They abandoned their posts. They cared more about survival than defending a capital city that was robbing them. And this is the crucial point. The barbarians didn't break through Rome's walls because they were suddenly stronger. They broke through because Rome was weaker. The financial rot had destroyed the social contract. Why fight for an empire that pays you in fake money? Why produce goods for a system that punishes savers? When the money dies, trust dies. And when trust dies, the empire dies. The Visigoths sacked Rome in 410 AD, not with a bang, but with a whimper. They walked into a hollow shell of a once great civilization. Now, let us turn that mirror toward ourselves. Let us look at the United States of America. Just like Rome, America began with a currency backed by hard assets. The US dollar was, for a long time, a receipt for gold. It was a promise that the government could not simply print its way out of trouble. This discipline helped build the greatest industrial engine in human history. Just like Rome, America became the undisputed global superpower after a massive global conflict, World War II. We became the world's policemen. We established military bases in vast corners of the globe. We became incredibly wealthy, shifting from a nation of hard-working producers to a nation of high-consuming debtors. And just like Rome, we reached a point where our ambitions outweighed our wallet. We wanted the guns and butter. We wanted massive military spending to maintain our global empire, and we wanted massive social welfare programs at home. Starting in the 1960s, the pressure began to mount. We were fighting the Vietnam War and launching the Great Society programs simultaneously. Gold was draining out of the U.S. Treasury as foreign nations demanded payment. So, in 1971, President Richard Nixon did exactly what Emperor Nero did. He closed the gold window. He declared that the U.S. dollar was no longer convertible into gold. In that instant, the U.S. dollar stopped being a receipt for reality and started being a fiat currency. Its value was now based entirely on faith in the United States government. We switched from the silver denarius to the copper coin. Since 1971, the debasement of the U.S. dollar has been relentless. But unlike Rome, which was limited by how fast they could physically melt down and remint metal coins, we have no physical limitations. We can create trillions of dollars with a few keystrokes on a computer at the Federal Reserve. This allows us to speed run the collapse. What took Rome 200 years, we are achieving in 50. Look at the national debt. It took the United States over 200 years to accumulate its first $1 trillion in debt. Today, we add a new $1 trillion to the debt every few months. We are now over $34 trillion in debt. This number is so large the human brain cannot comprehend it. How are we paying our bills? We are printing the money. The Federal Reserve creates new dollars out of thin air to buy the government's debt. This is exactly the same mechanism as adding base metal to the silver coin. Every new dollar that is printed dilutes the purchasing power of every dollar you worked hard to save. We are already seeing the cracks form. We are already seeing the inflation. You feel it every time you go to the grocery store. You feel it when you look at housing prices that have become completely disconnected from reality. The government will try to tell you inflation is low, just like Roman emperors claimed their copper coins were silver, but your bank account knows the truth. We are seeing the breakdown of the social contract. Just like late-stage Rome, America is facing intense internal division. The gap between the super-rich, who benefit from the money printing, and the working class is wider than at any point since the Gilded Age. We are seeing the rise of bread and circuses. We are distracted by endless entertainment cycles, social media dopamine loops, and celebrity gossip, while the foundations of our economic house are termites eating away the wood. We have a population heavily dependent on government assistance, creating a political feedback loop that makes cutting spending political suicide. And now we look at the timeline. Sir John Glubb, a British historian, analyzed the life cycles of great empires over 3,000 years. He found a startling pattern. The Assyrians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Roman Republic, the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, they all lasted for an average of about 250 years. They go through the same stages. The age of pioneers, the age of conquests, the age of commerce, the age of affluence, the age of intellect, and finally, the age of decadence and decline. The age of decadence is marked by debt, an influx of foreigners, a welfare state, and a weakening of the shared values that built the empire. Does that sound familiar? The United States declared independence in 1776. If you add 250 years to that date, you land squarely on the year 2026. We are mathematically at the end of the historical average lifespan of a superpower. We have checked every single box on the list of empire collapse symptomatology. We have the massive debt, we have the currency debasement, we have the military overextension, we have the internal social division. The Roman Empire's final mistake was believing that the laws of economics didn't apply to them because they were Rome. They thought they could cheat the system by diminishing their currency, and that the rest of the world would just accept it forever. America's final mistake is exactly the same. We believe that because the US dollar is the world reserve currency, we can print infinite amounts of it without consequence. We believe that we can borrow more money than has ever existed in human history and never have to pay it back in real terms. But the rest of the world is waking up, just like the merchants in ancient Rome began to refuse the debased denarius. We see nations around the world, from China to Russia to Saudi Arabia, actively taking steps to move away from the US dollar and global trade. These are the modern barbarians at the gate. They are not attacking with swords, they are attacking by simply rejecting our debt. If the world stops accepting dollars for real goods like oil and manufactured products, all those trillions of printed dollars will flood back into the domestic US economy. The result will not just be the inflation we see today, it will be hyperinflation that wipes out the middle class overnight. The year 2026 is not a doomsday prediction where the world ends on a Tuesday. It is a historical marker. It is the point where the mathematical weight of our debt and debasement becomes unsustainable. It is the point where the interest payments on our national debt become larger than our entire defense budget. It is the point of no return. When Rome fell, it wasn't the end of the world. Humanity survived. Italy survived. But the structure of that society, the comfort, the security, and the global dominance vanished into the Dark Ages. Those who were dependent on the system were crushed when the system failed. Those who survived and even thrived during the collapse of Rome were the ones who saw it coming. They were the ones who held real assets, land, gold, silver, productive skills, instead of relying on the debased currency of a dying state. The warning signs are flashing red. History is screaming at us across the centuries. The mistake has already been made. The poison is already in the system. The only question now is how long the patient has left and what you're going to do to prepare for the inevitable reset. We cannot stop the cycle of empire. It is bigger than any of us. It is bigger than any politician. But we can learn from it. We can refuse to be like the Roman citizen standing in the Colosseum, believing that the party will last forever.